Gilgamesh said, "Your price is too high. Such riches are far beyond my means. Tell me, how could I ever repay you, even if I gave you jewels, perfumes, rich robes? And what will happen to me when your heart turns elsewhere and your lust burns out? Why would I want to be the lover of a broken oven that fails in the cold, a flimsy door that the wind blows through, a palace that falls on its staunchest defenders, a mouse that gnaws through its thin reed shelter, tar that blackens the workman's hands, a water skin that is full of holes and leaks all over the bearer, a piece of limestone that crumbles and undermines a solid stone wall, a battering ram that knocks down the rampart of an allied city, a shoe that mangles its owner's foot? Which of your husbands did you love forever? Which could satisfy your endless desires? Let me remind you of how they suffered, how each one came to a bitter end. Remember what happened to that beautiful boy Tammuz? You loved him when you were both young, then you changed. You sent him to the underworld and doomed him to be wailed for, year after year. You loved the bright speckled roller bird, then you changed. You attacked him and broke his wings, and he sits in the woods crying, "Awee, awee." You loved the lion, matchless in strength, then you changed. You dug 7 pits for him. When he fell, you left him to die. You loved the hot-blooded, war-bold stallion, then you changed. You doomed him to whips and spurs, to endlessly gallop with a bit in his mouth, to muddy his own water when he drinks from a pool. And for his mother, the goddess Salili, you ordained a weeping that will never end. You loved the shepherd, the master of the flocks, who every day would bake bread for you, and who would bring you a fresh slaughtered roasted lamb. Then you changed. You touched him, he became a wolf, and now his own shepherd boys drive him away, and his own dogs snap at his hairy thighs. You loved the gardener, Ishulanu, who would bring you baskets of fresh-picked dates every day to brighten your table. You lusted for him. You drew close and said, "Sweet Ishulanu, let me suck your rod, touch my vagina, caress my jewel." And he frowned and answered, "What can you offer but the bread of dishonor, the beer of shame, and thin reeds as covers when the cold wind blows?" But you kept up your sweet talk, and at last he gave in. Then you changed. You turned him into a toad and doomed him to live in his devastated garden. And why would my fate be any different? If I too became your lover, you would treat me as cruelly as you treated them. Ishtar shrieked. She exploded with fury. Raging, weeping, she went up to heaven to her father, Anu and Antu, her mother, as tears of anger poured down her cheeks. "Father, Gilgamesh slandered me. He hurled the worst insults at me. He said horrible, unforgiving things." Anu said to the princess Ishtar, "But might you have not provoked this? Did you try to seduce him, or did he just start insulting you for no reason at all?" Ishtar said, "Please, father, I beg you, give me the bull of heaven. Just for a little while. I want to bring it to earth. I want it to kill that liar Gilgamesh and destroy his palace. If you say no, I will smash the gates of the underworld, and 1,000,000 famished ghouls will ascend to devour the living, and the living will be outnumbered by the dead." Anu said to the princess Ishtar, "But if I give you the bull of heaven, Uruk will have famine for 7 long years. Have you provided the people with grain for 7 years, and the cattle with fodder?" Ishtar said, "Yes, of course I have gathered grain and fodder. I have stored up enough, more than enough for 7 years. When Anu heard this, he called for the bull and handed its nose rope to the princess Ishtar. Ishtar led the bull down to earth. It entered and bellowed. The whole land shook. The streams and marshes dried up. The Euphrates water level dropped by 10 feet. When the bull snorted, the earth cracked open, and 100 warriors fell in and died. It snorted again, the earth cracked open, and 200 warriors fell in and died. When it snorted a 3rd time, the earth cracked open, and Enkidu fell in, up to his waist. He jumped out and grabbed the bull's horns. It spat its slobber in his face. It lifted its tail and spewed dung all over him. Gilgamesh rushed in and shouted, "Dear friend, keep fighting. Together we are sure to win." Enkidu circled behind the bull, seized it by the tail, and set his foot on its haunch. Then Gilgamesh, skillfully, like a butcher, strode up and thrust his knife between its shoulders and the base of its horns. After they had killed the bull of heaven, they ripped out its heart. They offered it to Shamash. Then they both bowed before him and sat down like brothers side by side. Ishtar was outraged. She climbed to the top of Uruk's great wall. She writhed in grief and wailed, "Not only did Gilgamesh slander me, now the brute has killed his own punishment, the bull of heaven." When Enkidu heard these words, he laughed. He reached down, he ripped off one of the bull's thighs, then flung it in Ishtar's face. "If only I could catch you, this is what I would do to you. I would rip you apart and drape the bull's guts over your arms." Ishtar assembled her priestesses, those who offer themselves to all men in her honor. They placed the bull's gory thigh on the altar and began a solemn lament. Gilgamesh summoned his master craftsmen. They marveled at the gigantic horns. Each horn was made from 30 pounds of lapis lazuli. Each was thick as the length of 2 thumbs. Together they held 400 gallons. He called for that much oil to anoint his father's statue, then hung the 2 massive horns in the chapel dedicated to Lugobanda. The 2 friends washed themselves in the river and returned to the palace, hand in hand. They rode in a chariot through the main streets. The people shouted and cheered as they passed. Gilgamesh said to his singing girls, "Tell me, who is the handsomest of men? Tell me, who is the bravest of heroes?" "Gilgamesh, he is the handsomest of men." "Enkidu, he is the bravest of heroes." "We are victors who in our fury flung the bull's thigh in Ishtar's face, and now in the streets she has no one to avenge her." There was singing and feasting in the palace that night. Later, when the warriors were stretched out asleep, Enkidu had a terrifying dream. When he woke up, he said to Gilgamesh, "Dear friend, why are the great gods assembled?" "Beloved brother," Enkidu said, "last night I had a terrifying dream. I dreamt that we had offended the gods. They met in council, and Anu said, 'They have slaughtered the bull of heaven and killed Hambaba, watchman of the cedar forest. Therefore one of the 2 must die.' Then Enlil said to him, 'Enkidu, not Gilgamesh, is the one who must die.' Enkidu fell sick. He lay on his bed, sick at heart, and tears flowed like streams. He said to Gilgamesh, 'Dear friend, dear brother, they are taking me from you. I will not return. I will sit with the dead in the underworld, and never will I see my dear brother again.' When Gilgamesh heard his friend's words, he wept. Swiftly the tears flowed down his cheeks. He said to Enkidu, 'Dearest brother, you have been a reasonable man, but now you are talking nonsense. How do you know that your dream is not a favorable one? Fear has your lips buzzing like flies.' Enkidu said, 'Beloved brother, last night I had a second bad dream. The heavens thundered, the earth replied, and I was standing on a shadowy plain. A creature appeared with a lion's head. His face was ghastly. He had a lion's paws and eagle's talons and wings. He flew at me. He seized me by the hair. I tried to struggle, but with one blow he capsized me like a raft. He leapt upon me like a bull. He trampled my bones. 'Gilgamesh, save me,' I cried. But you didn't save me. You were afraid, and you didn't come. The creature touched me, and suddenly feathers covered my arms. He bound them behind me and forced me down to the underworld, the house of darkness, the home of the dead, where all who enter never return to sweet earth again. Those who dwell there squat in the darkness. Dirt is their food, their drink is clay. They are dressed in feathered garments like birds. They never see light. And on the door and bolt, the dust lies thick. When I entered that house, I looked, and around me were piles of crowns. I saw proud kings who had ruled the land, who had set out roast meat before the gods, and offered cool water for cakes for the dead. I saw high priests and acolytes squatting, exorcists and prophets, the ecstatics and the dull. I saw Etana, the primeval king, Sumakwan, the wild animals' god, and Eshkir-Giggle, the somber queen of the underworld. Belit Seri, her scribe, was kneeling before her, reading from the tablet on which each mortal's death is inscribed. When the queen saw me, she glared and said, 'Who has brought this new resident here?